All right, we should be good to go here, guys. Just gonna go ahead and check on the quality, audio quality here, and then we should be good to go and live. Thank you guys so much for your patience while I work through those technical difficulties here. Make sure everything's good to go with the audio, and then we're gonna go ahead and jump right in. Alrighty, so for those of you who don't know me already, my name is Kenny Phases. I own and operate my own business using Blender 3D, and I also have an Instagram and YouTube channel that I stream on often. So today what we're going to be covering is a little bit of physics in Blender. We're actually going to be going ahead and making this lemon pop animation. So the way this is going to work is we're going to be using free assets using Blender 3D, and pretty much everything is going to get created from scratch. You can see the result on the right hand side here. And it just looks fantastic, and this is something you can use for product animations. You can use this just for your own Instagram reels to show off your skills. It's just really fun to create, and I love physics, and you're going to be able to learn a lot more about this if you're interested. The core Blender class is going to be coming out soon, and I will go ahead and mention that later, but for right now I do want to jump right into this tutorial. So as you can see, this is what we're going to be creating right here. Now I do have the blend file open. This is the original blend file that I used. You can see I have it formatted for YouTube to create thumbnails, and I just want to go ahead and play this back for you in our solid view here. As you can see, we have a nice zoom out, and I'm going to show you how to animate the camera as well. And then we have these lemons kind of explode from the center. So there's a lot going on here, but the very first thing I want to go over is the actual rigid body physics of all this with some basic elements. So let's go ahead and open up a completely new document, and I'm going to show you how to create this popping simulation first, and then we're going to go ahead and get into the actual texturing, the advanced physics, and the actual lighting and all that good stuff. All right. Very first thing I'm going to want to do is actually just add in a cube to our scene. As soon as we have this cube, we're going to enable rigid body physics on it. So I'm going to go over to my physics tab. I'm going to enable rigid body physics. I'm going to make sure that's set to active. And I'm also going to checkbox this little animated thing right here. But before I do that, I'm going to show you exactly what we're going to do. So I'm going to scale this down a little bit, just move it off to the side. Now, I don't want gravity for my scene, and this will be really important when we start to add our force fields. So I'm going to go over to my scene properties. I'm not going to uncheck gravity, but I am going to turn off our Z value to 0. And that's super important because you're going to see how our force field interacts with our physics objects. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and add in a regular force field, and you can just keep that right in the center. You can move it wherever you want. I'm going to keep mine in the center. For my strength, I'm going to do something like -400, and then for my flow, I'll choose 5. Now, what we're going to do here is we're actually going to have our rigid body be attracted to our force field, and we're just going to double check that everything's working as we continue. So if we press play, you can see that this is quite simple, but our cube indeed is attracted to our force field. I'm also going to set my end frame to 100 because we really don't need to do anything too crazy here, and I want to make sure we can see our physics repeatedly over and over again if I just let this play through. So I'm going to go ahead and scale this down a little bit. I am going to duplicate it a couple of times using Shift D, and then I'm also going to play this back because I just want to make sure all my physics are properly working. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we have. And as you can see, everything is attracted to the center. Now, this is the very first step as we begin to experiment with our physics. The way that we can make this popping effect is actually kind of tricky, but I was messing around with this earlier and I was able to find something that worked really well for this specific effect. I've seen it done in Cinema 4D, and I knew it was possible in Blender. So I'm going to go ahead and take my cube. I'm going to scale it really, really far down, and I'm going to place it towards the center of our scene here. Now, what I'm going to do is change a couple of settings, and then we're going to duplicate this as we need it to be duplicated. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure we are on box for the collision type. I'm going to make sure my friction is all the way up, and then I'm going to check box this collision margin, and I'll just keep it at 0.04. That should be fine. Now, the trick to this is the animated checkbox. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that is checked. Now, the very first thing I need to do is actually insert a keyframe for my scale. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure this is really scaled far down. Okay, I'm going to make sure it's towards the center. And then I'm also going to hover over my scale, press I to insert that keyframe, and I'm going to zoom in on my timeline. I'm going to head to about frame 15 or so, maybe 14, and then I'm going to go ahead and insert one more keyframe. Make sure you're not keyframing the rotation or the location, and this will make sense in a second. Then I'm going to skip to frame 15. I am now going to scale this up to a larger amount, hover over the scale, and press I. Now if we play this back, you'll see it quickly pop as it does there. This popping right here is exactly what we need for our effect to work. Now, all we have to do is duplicate this a bunch of times. But there's one more little itsy bitsy step that we have to do. If you zoom in on here, on frame 14, we have animated checked. I'm going to hover over where it says animated. I'm going to press I, and you can see there's this little diamond here. That means we've keyframed that value. I'm going to continue over to frame 15. Now we don't want this to be animated anymore because we want the physics to take over our object. So I'm going to uncheck animated. I'm going to hover over it and press I, and at this point the physics will now be enabled again. So if we play this back, we're going to get something like that. And now you kind of see how it kind of pops out and it travels away and then comes back. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to take my cube and I'm going to duplicate it a bunch of times using the Shift D shortcut. And I'm just going to create a bunch of these. It really doesn't matter how many you create. This is where your creative freedom comes in. You guys can use your own creative liberties to add as many cubes or elements as you want. And now when we press play, we get this popping effect. And that is the core of what we're trying to accomplish. So again, you get this popping effect. Now what's really cool about this is now that we have everything copied over and our scale pops out like that, which is creating our popping effect, all we need to do is we need to go ahead and slide some keyframes around to get different elements to appear. For example, if I take one cube, and I'll go ahead and make these random colors so you guys can see, I'll just take this green cube, I'll Shift D to duplicate it. Let's say we only want this specific cube that's selected to pop at a specific moment. What I can do is I can highlight the keyframes. Okay, I'm going to zoom out here. I'll press G on my keyboard to move them along the timeline, and I'll have them pop around frame 50. So what you'll see is now this specific cube is going to pop at frame 50. It'll give us additional physics. So I'm going to go ahead and move this towards the center so that it pops towards the center of our motion here. Let's try this out. Let's go ahead and press play. Again, this specific cube shouldn't pop until frame 50. Let's see if this works properly. All right, so now we're coming up on frame 50, and we should have an additional pop, and there it is right there. Now, this is how these people use Cinema 4D. They probably use a similar method to this, but I knew it had to be replicated in Blender, and pop, there's another one. So you can also have these pop on intervals. You can create a sine wave function, whatever you'd like to do. This worked best for me. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and we're going to dive into how we can create a really cool looking animation with realistic looking objects. Now, the specific site that I'm going to use is I'm actually going to use Polyhaven. So let's go ahead and open up a new Chrome window. I'm going to type in polyhaven.com, go over to my assets, and I'm going to go to models. Now, I found this awesome lemon model, so I'm just going to utilize this because I already have it downloaded. What's really awesome is if I click on this lemon, you can download it in different formats. You can download it in different resolutions. It's just a really nice photo scan lemon here, and you can see you have different angles, different lighting. So I'm going to go through how to download this, and I'm going to actually import it into Blender. All right, let me go ahead and minimize this. So I'm going to start a completely, actually I'm going to just use this file. I'm going to go to File, Import, FBX. Now I already have this downloaded, so it should be right on my desktop. I'm going to go ahead and click on lemon, and here's our lemon in the middle. Now I'm going to just delete all these cubes because we're going to start with just our lemon. Now before we get into our actual physics, I'm going to go ahead and click on my lemon. I am going to go to my rendered view, and we're going to be using cycles for this. I have 3070, so we're going to be running that. I'm going to go ahead and go over to my world properties, click on color, environment texture, and I'm just going to pop open an environment texture that I use quite often. And this is also from polyhaven.com. So all this stuff that we're using so far, completely for free. There's a couple of elements I found on CG Trader, but we'll get into that. And as you can see, the lemon looks good already. So there's a couple of different elements to making this lemon explode. As you could see in my previous example, we have the lemon sitting in the center, and then it pops open, right? So we have a single lemon that then turns into some other lemons. So what I'd like to do, make sure I give this a quick save. I'm going to go ahead and call this explosion pop example. I like to save frequently. I don't know if you guys are like me at all, but I save all the time. I'm going to duplicate this with Shift D. One of these lemons is going to be our initial lemon, and then the other lemon is going to be used for physics. So right now we should already have our physics set up. I'm going to go ahead and do everything I did with the initial cube, and we're going to go ahead and format this lemon for our lemon pop. So the very first thing I'm going to do is scale this way down so you can barely see it. I'm going to put it towards the center. Now I'm going to go ahead and give this a rigid body, type active. I'm going to checkbox animated as I did before. Instead of our shape being mesh, which takes forever for Blender to calculate, I'm actually going to choose capsule, which works really well. Now it's not perfect. You can see the physics bounds here if we go to frame selected. The physics bounds are, it's basically like some sort of pill shape, right? But it does surround the lemon enough where we're going to get some realistic interactions when the other lemons collide with each other. Now, before I start copying this, I want to make sure all my physics settings are correct. 1 kilogram should be fine. That's actually semi-realistic. It would probably be like more like half a kilogram for a lemon. Friction, I'll turn that up. Collision margin, I'll turn that to 0.01. And we should be good to go. Now, again, we're going to keep this at a very small scale. Hover over the scale, press I, and then we're going to move forward to about frame maybe 14 again. We're going to insert another keyframe for the scale because remember, we don't want it to pop yet. And then I'm going to use my arrow key to jump forward 1 frame. And then I'm going to go ahead and I am going to scale this up to the other size of the lemon. So go ahead and scale it up until you feel it's the correct size. You can use exact values if you want, or you can just type in 111. So I'll just do that, 111. I'll press I, and now we should have something that looks like this. But remember, we have to keyframe our, where is it? Our dynamic animated. So let's go ahead and go back to frame 14. Hover over animated, press I, because we want it checked on frame 14. And then on frame 15, we want to have it unchecked, and I'm going to press I. Now we should have something that allows the physics to interact with our force field. So let's go ahead and back this up. We have the popping, and then it will go flying all over the place. Now right now there's not a whole lot going on, but there's a setting that's really interesting under the dynamics tab on our lemon that I wanted to go over, because sometimes when you animate things you get a lot of crazy rotation and things just don't slow down. So if you look, there's something called rotation dampening down here. I'm going to go ahead and raise that up to 0.4. That way, when it starts spinning, it's not spinning forever, because sometimes that will happen. All of them, except for the force field. Let me just make sure that our force field is non-selectable. There we go. And now I'm going to select just these ones. We're going to go up to Object, Transform. So I'm going to squeeze them back together, and we'll choose some on the Z. And this is going to give them kind of a sporadic movement. Now, when they all go and they explode, it should be pretty crazy looking. We don't really know what we're going to get until we press play. So let's go ahead and let's see what happens. Here we go. And as you can see, it does work, and it is indeed quite crazy. So again, this lemon right here doesn't have any physics, but if we back this up and we press play, you can see that all of our lemons pop out at once. Now they go pretty crazy, right? And part of the reason for that is going to be the friction. Part of the reason for that is going to be if any of them are overlapping. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly check and make sure none of these are overlapping. There's some that are quite close, so I'm going to go ahead and move a couple of those around. And remember, the location can easily be adjusted at the beginning. You don't have to worry about keyframing that. So you should be good to go there. All right, now let's go ahead and let's talk about the big lemon. So the big lemon is going to start in the center, and it's just going to disappear as soon as that explosion happens on frame 15. So I'm going to reset our X and our Y for our lemon. And remember, this is our big lemon. So let's go ahead and set up our camera shot so that we kind of can see what's going to be in the frame. So I'm just going to add a new camera. I'm going to flip it up 90 degrees. I'm going to give it a rotation on far away. I think I'm going to give us a 100mm lens. I'm just going to scale the camera down a bit, push us forward. Again, I'm going to snap into frame here, and I'm just going to see where we're at. Let's go ahead and go into rendered view and see what we have so far. So far, we just have our lemon, which is great. But I want to get a little bit closer to it, okay? And I want to start very close. I think I'm also going to enable depth of field, and then I'm going to target my force field, because our force field is in the direct center of our scene. For our f-stop, which is basically how much blur you get in the background, right? Everyone knows about photography. I'm going to go ahead and just set that to 5, and we are good to go. And it's a little bit blurry, but we'll adjust it in the future. Right now, I'm going to go back to solid view, and I'm going to talk about our keyframing of rendered and viewport for our lemon. So remember, right now we can see the lemon, which is great. That's what we want to see. We want to see it explode into a million lemons. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my object properties, my visibility, and remember, all these little things with dots next to them, we can keyframe all of those values. So what I'm going to do is I am going to insert a keyframe on viewport and render. I'm going to jump over to frame, 14. All right, keyframe it one more time. Now at frame 15, at this very moment, we need to completely make this thing disappear. So I'm going to uncheck viewport and render. I'm going to press I over both of those to give ourselves a keyframe. And now we have something that looks like this. Okay? Now, how do we back the camera up? Well, we're simply going to keyframe the camera. Now, we know that the camera should probably already be backing up from the start. So I'm just going to insert a keyframe for the rotation or the location of our camera. And then around frame 14, I know that I kind of want this to zoom back before the explosion. So I'm just going to go ahead and drag us back on the y-axis a little bit, press I, and then I'm going to preview this. Boom. Okay, so we have our camera back up from the scene, and then we have our explosion. But I want the camera to continue to back up all the way to frame 100. So on frame 100, I'm going to pull us back in our scene even more to about here. And now we'll have something that looks kind of like this. Okay, we have the explosion, and then we keep zooming out, and then it restarts. And everything looks really good. I'm going to give that a quick save. And another thing I'm going to do is press A on my timeline to highlight all my keyframes. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to interpolation mode, and I'm going to choose Bezier. Now if we back this up and we press play, it's going to be a lot smoother. And I also want this to be formatted for Instagram. So I'm going to go ahead and make the resolution 1080 by 1920, and we are good to go. And you can see that I want to make sure that I'm really zoomed out here, right? And I'm just going to go ahead and re-keyframe my camera, and now we are good to go. Now, for the lighting, I'm going to go ahead and talk about lighting now because there's a lot of cool things we can do besides just our HDRI. So I'm going to go ahead and go over some different planes that we can add and backgrounds as well. So I'm going to go into my solid view. I'm going to start off by adding in a plane. I'm going to RX90 to rotate it on the x-axis. I'm just going to bring it back, go to my camera view, make sure that it's taking up a majority of the frame. Then I'm going to Shift D to duplicate. RZ90, all right, we should have something that looks kind of like this. It's kind of like a corner. Now, one of these is just going to be our background. The other one is going to be what I like to call I believe it's called a key light. I could be totally wrong. It's one or the other. This is going to be a black plane, and this one's going to be probably also a darker color. So let's go ahead and go to frame 100. Now, I'm going to bring our right side plane all the way to the left, like follows. Now, watch what happens when I give this a new material and I make this black. Now hold on, let me make the background black first. I'll just make this gray. Now our left plane on the left, watch what happens as soon as I make this a dark color. Take a look at the lemons. So take a look at the left side of the lemons right now, before, after. Now it just adds that slight bit of contrast. Now you don't have to do this exact coloration, totally up to you. This is just what I personally think looks good. Now for the background, I think I chose some sort of green color before and it looked kind of good. You can choose a blue, you can choose pretty much any color you want. I would just turn up the roughness of the background quite a bit. And then if you really want to get your framing right, what I like to do is I like to click on my camera, go to my viewport display, and just raise this value right here. It's called pass part out. It just basically means how much outside of the camera frame can we see. I don't really want to see any of it because we're not going to be rendering that part of it, right? All right, now last but not least, I'm going to go ahead and do a couple quick settings, and then we're going to do a test render and just see how this turns out, okay? Very first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure motion blur is enabled, and then I'm going to go back to my camera settings, and I kind of want to fine-tune this depth of field. So I'm actually going to disable the object that I was targeting, and I'm going to manually adjust the distance. I'm going to zoom in really far here on my viewport, and I'm just going to manually adjust the distance until I feel like it's correct. Let's go ahead and see where that value might lie. That looks pretty good, about 1.6 meters. That looks really good. Now we're not going to be this zoomed in, but if we zoom out, we get just a subtle fade, right? Some subtle blurring on the outside of our objects. Now let's go ahead and let's run this back. Oh no, we did something wrong. So this is why we either need to keyframe the depth of field or we do need to pick a target object. In this case, I may just be able to pick this original lemon, but then we're going to have to really mess with our f-stop to get it correct. Let's just pretend this looked perfect. Let's go ahead and press play. Now again, the rate of which your camera goes back is totally up to you how you want to decide that. But this looks pretty cool because we have our lemon exploding into a bunch of other lemons, right? Now your results are going to probably vary depending on how many lemons you have, the rigid body type that you choose, the size of the lemon, the weight of the lemon, the friction, right? There's going to be a lot of different attributes that actually result in a different animation. But I'm going to go ahead and play this back while I quickly check on the comments here. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything important. And I also want to quickly mention for you guys a course that I'm working on. Looks like everyone's watching from all the way around the world. That is awesome. Very happy to hear that. Does anybody have any questions? Let me just go ahead and take a look here. All live at the same time. Wow. Evie, yep. Do you do these videos in Spanish or for the majority of your American audience? I believe we probably have closed captions. Yep. All right, so I want to mention the core course here. Let's go ahead and pull that up for you guys. So this is something that I was lucky enough to be a part of here. So besides just this awesome tutorial that we're running through right now, I do want to talk about the core fundamentals of Blender real quick. And I want to talk to you about how incredibly excited I am to be a part of this, first of all, and just some of the amazing creators that we have showcasing their work on here and giving you guys hours and hours of amazing content that you're probably not going to find anywhere else. So again, this is the core fundamentals. I'm sure you saw CG Cookie release the trailer for this, but again, it just is going to be amazing. I want to run you through some of the basic things that you're going to be learning here. Now, this is an all-encompassing course that includes everything from mesh modeling to digital sculpting, which that in itself is hard to find amazing creators for, right? Lighting, super important. I wish I was teaching lighting. Lighting is so important. I can't express enough how important lighting is to making or breaking your renders. Materials and shading, again, that goes hand in hand with lighting. Texturing, animation, rigging, these are all incredible. And then yes, yours truly, I'm teaching physics and I am so excited to be teaching that. We have compositing. Again, this is start to finish. If you've even never opened Blender, this will not necessarily make you a master, but you're going to cover every single thing that you can possibly think of in Blender. And we have some incredible creators. Look at some of the people that are teaching these specific learning outcomes. We have Jonathan Lampel, very well known in the Blender community. Kent Trammell, Jesse Kaizen, he has a pretty big YouTube channel as well. And you've probably heard of some of these other names as well. And they all have incredible content, definitely worth a follow on Instagram and YouTube. I just could not be more excited about this course. And I'm going to go ahead and play the trailer really quick for you guys because I'm just, again, so excited. And the trailer was just beautiful. And let me know if you guys can hear this okay. You should be able to. And if it's too scratchy, just let me know. All right, let's check this out. Beautiful animation right there. Oh my goodness. Amazing. So I'm going to be doing a voiceover while that continues to play. Just first of all, incredible animation in itself. If I had never seen this course before or been a part of it, I would be signing up 100% because it is hard to find an all-encompassing course like this. It really genuinely is. Like, even if you look online, you can find one here or there, but you have to piece different ones together. There hasn't ever really been a moment where everything's been all encompassed like this. So I'm just super happy to be a part of it. You can see they're showcasing some different screenshots from the tutorials and the course modules here. Again, you're getting 9 courses and it's available for pre-order right now. So go ahead and check out the link in the description. And then also check out, I believe you guys can follow CG Cookie on x.com. There's Blender Market, of course. Definitely check out all their stuff. That was just incredible. I am so excited for this. So, but yeah, that was kind of a quick little preview of how we go through some of the physics stuff, and everything that I covered right here, I also cover in the physics course that I'm working on for the core fundamentals. So you're gonna get a lot of this and so much more. I'll just quickly outline for you guys some of the things that I do cover because I know a lot of you guys are gonna be pretty curious. First of all, we go over rigid body physics, which this is all encompassing, right? We go over the dynamics of everything. We go over fixed constraints. We go over different rigging with rigid body motors, the springs, the pistons, sliders, hinges, you name it, we go over it. Then our next chapter, we're going to be talking about soft body physics. Chapter 3, we talk about cloth physics. That's actually one of my favorites. It's really fun to create cloth physics in Blender. And then we go over smoke, fire, and fluid. Again, you're getting all of this. This is just one of the 9 courses that you guys are going to get with the core fundamentals. So super, super exciting there. Looks like we have a quick question in the chat right here. Let's go ahead and take a look. We see some super cool motion done in Cinema 4D. Do you think we can get the same quality renders in Blender as well? 1000% you can. I know that for a fact because I've seen it, and you can look at a lot of side-by-side comparisons. Now, of course, Blender is free and you can create some incredible renders for free, but if you do invest a little bit more time and energy and a little bit of financial investment, you can also mess around with different render engines. There's Redshift, there's Octane, and of course there's some incredible free and paid add-ons, as well as the education that you're getting with this course. I can almost guarantee if you take this course, you're going to be incredibly happy with the visual output you get with your renders. Like, you can create some incredible things. Again, a lot of people will say this all the time. It's not necessarily the tool you're using, right, but how you're using the tool. And if you just use a couple of basic techniques, you can get some pretty incredible renders. Even with something like this, right? For example, we're using some photo scan textures right here. And this looks really good without putting in too much work, right? We have a camera with a realistic depth of field. We have a photo scanned object that looks pretty realistic, at least to me. We have motion blur enabled. We can create compositing around this, color grading. This can all be done inside Blender. So in terms of your price to value ratio, there is no price, right? Blender's free. So you can't really beat that to begin with. There's nothing wrong with other programs, and I'll never bash another program, but Blender by far is going to always be my favorite because there's no barrier to entry, right? And all the information that you want is either in a course that you can buy or it's something you can research on your own. So getting incredible renders that are at the same level as Cinema 4D is absolutely achievable, and you can probably get just as good renders, if not better. The major limiting factor is going to be probably your render engine and your skill set, right? So do you have good lighting? Do you know how to frame a shot properly? Do you know how to create incredible textures? Is your modeling proportional? Does it look realistic? These are things that you can control within Blender. So very exciting. When is the course coming out? I will leave that to CG Cookie to answer, but it should be very soon. Very exciting. Do you recommend switching to Blender 4.2? I always recommend the most recent version of Blender. There's pretty much no reason to not update Blender, right? They're always coming out with new features, and almost always when Blender releases a new version, it's going to be better than the last one, more efficient. There's going to be more accessibility, and pretty much everything is better. They always outline everything in their documentation. So if you're ever curious, you can also revert back to an old version. So if there's a version that you really like and you're like, you know what, I really didn't like this new update, they have every single version available to you. So that's also a really nice touch by Blender. So not a lot of companies do that, right? They just want you to get the latest version and put you on a subscription service, right? Is there a course for Python, scripting, and open shading languages? That would also be a CG Cookie question, but I don't believe we get into any scripting within the core fundamentals. Scripting is probably going to be considered a more advanced topic, okay? Python's great though, and I've messed around with it just a little bit. So, do I have any suggestions for a Python course? Not necessarily. YouTube is my main source if I'm looking for more information. There's a lot of great creators that do go over Python, and one of the greatest things about Python and Blender is that when you hover over certain elements, you can actually copy the code of those specific elements, and this is just based on tutorials that I've watched, and you can do some pretty incredible things with that. So if you're curious how this input box works, right, you can actually copy the code for that, paste it into the script editor, and start running that and creating your own plugins, things like that. It's a whole nother advanced thing. I would love to be able to teach it, but unfortunately I just don't know enough about it at the current moment. I do want to quickly go over a couple more things. We probably have about a good maybe 25 minutes left on the stream here. Maybe we'll go and get the full hour in here. I do want to go over a couple of other things. Okay, here we go. So again, we're going to be covering fluid, smoke, and fire. And then we're going to get into particle systems, dynamic paint, force fields, which of course, as you can tell, are my favorite. And then we're going to go over some amazing tips and tricks to make sure that you guys don't get caught up with your physics simulations, because there are a lot of things that can and will go wrong. So let me go ahead and pull up this other file too, just because I love this one so much more. I think the lighting turned out great in this one. Now, I did want to also mention, right after I answered this question here, is there another course? I wanted to mention the background that we're working with here. Now, when you zoom in, it looks pretty realistic, right? There's a lot going on here. We have some depth of field. We have the same lighting as before. As you take a look at our lemons in the background is actually quite simply you guessed it, an image texture, right? It's an image. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom out, and this is going to look really funny. Now, you're probably looking at this and being like, wow, that's not professional at all. But the thing is, and this is why I love Blender, you get a professional result with some funny tactics, right? If we look in here, right, we have this upside down plant, we have an upside right plant, we have these lemons, and nothing's really proportional at all. And then we have this background plane, which is our image, and we have a bunch of plane. Like, what is going on here, right? If you look at this for the first time, you'll think that doesn't look professional. And then you hit the rendered view and you look at it and you're like, wow, that looks really good. So fake it till you make it, right? We have some fake plants that I got from, I believe it was CG Trader, completely for free. You can also get digital assets on Polyhaven. That's another option as well. But as you can see, we're getting some incredible results. And again, this goes back to the Cinema 4D question from before. Can you achieve the same level of quality? Yes. I believe, yes, you can, but you do have to put the work in, right? It's not one click solve, right? You have to put the work in. You have to find good assets or create them yourself. The physics have to look realistic. You have to do your research. A lot of the time, a big fix for creating realism in Blender, which is a hot topic, is just the scale of your items, right? Right now, believe it or not, these lemons are not to scale. I'm almost positive, because if I click on a lemon, it is, oh, maybe it is, 0.06 meters. I don't think that's correct, right? Now, if you want, you can look up the average size of a lemon, and you can input that value. All right, we do have a question here. I am working in the industry for 4 years, but still companies are not adopting Blender. What is the review on that? I'm glad CG Cookie is giving their take here. I definitely have I have a take on that, and I think a lot of it has to do with the licensing that they have as well, because they usually have, like, you know, maybe like a year contract with these companies, and they buy a big bulk order of the software, they distribute it out to their employees, and then they use it in their pipeline. But another thing is, I just think Blender is always constantly proving itself, and I mean, you guys might disagree, but it is tough to be considered the industry standard, right? And a lot of the times, companies are going to perceive something with a higher monetary value as higher quality as well. So when you have these paid programs like Cinema 4D, they might automatically consider that to be a higher quality output for the animation that you're going to be creating within the program. They might not realize you can achieve a similar, if not better, result in Blender. And again, there's really no one-size-fits-all answer for that, but that would be my take on it. Of course, I love Blender. I've always used Blender for the past 3-4 years. Unfortunately, big companies, it is hard to get them on board with new ideas. That's just always been, unfortunately, that's always been the way that it is. So, yeah, if you can convince them, convince them. Let's get another big company on board. Now, with individual client projects, it's kind of a different vibe, right? You can show them the output first, right? You don't say, hey, I made this in Blender. They don't really need to know that. As long as you're giving them a high quality output, most clients don't care what you're using, but you will have some people, and this happens to me all the time, come to you and say, I don't want it if it's not Houdini. I don't want it if it's not Cinema 4D, right? If it wasn't modeled in Fusion 360, I don't want it. But me personally, I usually showcase the visual first, and then I get into the descriptions later. Or if they say I want the original file, I'm like, okay, just so you know, it is a Blender file. They're like, I don't want it. Well, maybe they don't know how to use Blender, right? Not everyone is as well versed in Blender. It's an intimidating program. Look at all the tabs. Look at all the different options, the values. A lot of people aren't well versed in this program, and if you are, there's always going to be an area that you might lack. So a lot of the time, maybe the training behind Blender 2 is not at fault, but sometimes lacking, right? It's hard to find like a really good teacher for this stuff. So that's why, another reason why we're coming out with the core classes here, because we want people to get an all-encompassing view of what Blender has to offer here. So very exciting stuff. Do we have any more questions in the chat? Is there anything else I can go over in terms of this animation right here? And I'm going to try to make this file available to you guys somehow or another. I'll talk to CG Cookie so we can get it on like Google Drive or another file browser. But again, this is super simple, right? We have physics going on here, really simple rigid body physics. And then because we didn't use mesh, we have everything colliding in a nice organic way. And even if you have a really bad laptop that's not very fast, you can actually bake these physics, right? So a lot of people do feel, I think, limited by what they have at their disposal in terms of technology. And yes, I agree. It's very expensive to afford a computer, right, that is with a 3070 Ti or the 4090. It's not very practical for us 3D artists, right? We don't necessarily have a lot of money to begin with if we're just starting out. And even if we're already heavily invested, you could easily drop $3 to $4 grand on just a baseline computer with basic components. When I built this computer that I'm using right now, I believe I spent about $2,000 on it. So that was a very big investment for me at the time. The wife sure wasn't happy about it, but I told her, I said, as long as that investment comes back to me, I think it's worth it. And luckily for me, I was able to find clients, and it worked, right? And it all goes back to my education on Blender, right? YouTube, CG Cookie, all the different courses that I've signed up for. It is 100% worth it, right? You're going to invest in yourself and your skill set. And then you get those Cinema 4D level renders, right? The things that we all talk about. How do you do this? How do you do that? Well, I didn't know that I could even achieve this until earlier this morning. Grabbed myself a cup of coffee, I experimented with the physics, and I said there's no way that this can't be done in Blender, and sure enough, here we are creating this in Blender. Now, is it kind of a hacky way to do it? Yeah, maybe you could use particle physics, but I think this turned out great. All right, we have a couple more questions here. I feel like Blender is easy compared to other softwares. The interface is so easy to understand. Yes, so yeah, I agree. And when I started in Blender, and this is just a funny quick story for anyone who's curious how I got started, all I wanted to do, I'm going to show you exactly what I wanted to do because I'm so quick at it now. All I wanted to do is I wanted to drop a cube on a surface, right? I wanted a plane. I wanted to take a cube, all right? I wanted to make it a rigid body. Again, I didn't even know what this stuff was at the time. I wanted to make the bottom passive and the top active. And then I just simply wanted to drop the cube onto the surface like that. Pretty simple, right? Now it is for me. But back then, this was so advanced for me and intimidating. And I am just more than happy to be able to even do anything in Blender. This was the very first thing I ever did in Blender. I dropped a cube on a plane. And now here I am teaching physics and working with CG Cookie. And I have to credit the fact that every day I just worked towards something new. And now here we are creating things that look almost lifelike, if you ask me. So very, very exciting stuff. Yeah, and the interface is easy to understand. Yeah, once you get the hang of it, if you use it every day, it becomes easier. I have the technology now, but always having the trouble of just starting and finishing the problem. The problem or the project? Yeah, I will say I'm notorious for this as well. Finishing a project is incredibly difficult to do. It is, because sometimes you just want to keep adding little tidbits here and there, more details, better composition, right? Better framing, maybe another camera angle. Finishing a project as any type of artist is always a difficult thing to do. So I can resonate with that for sure. First time Blender's interface has been called easy to understand. Yeah, I've heard a little variety of different reviews on that. I mean, when you first glance at it, if you've never opened a program like, I'll just compare it to Photoshop real quick in terms of the interface. Like, both are extremely intimidating, right? Just the toolbar alone in Photoshop has to be like, I don't know, 50 different items in there, right? Maybe not really, that's an exaggeration, but when you look at a program like that and then you look at Blender, it's quite intimidating. And I still probably don't even know half the stuff in Blender. I mean, let's see, I rarely open the view area right here. I mean, I know what some of these things do, but to be honest, I only use what I need. And that's kind of the other part of Blender that I love. you can easily customize the entire interface, right? You can add new windows, take away old windows. You can adjust things like this, which is really nice. So if I'm like really focused on the timeline, I can go ahead and raise that up. And everything's just so modular in Blender. You just make it your own and do what you need to do to accomplish your project. There is no one size fits all. Now, typically, I just have always gone with the default view, and I almost always am in layout view. The only time I'm ever in the animation view, I'll just show you real quick. I'll snap to the camera. The only time I'm ever in this view is when I just want these two windows side by side. I collapse the timeline. I keep my viewport on the left in rendered view, and then what I'll do is I'll simply, play around with the different elements. Maybe this is too high or too low. Maybe I want this to be hidden behind the leaves, so I bring those leaves down, and I have this nice side-by-side view. So that's one of the reasons I usually use animation, the animation tab. Starting in 2.9, Blender UI was rough, gotten much more user-friendly over time. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I started 3 or 4 years ago, so I'm not even sure which Blender version that was. The 90-10 rule comes in handy. Cool Barry, can you explain what the 90-10 rule is? I do feel I've heard of it before, but I don't think I'm 100% familiar with what that is. I would love to hear more about that. I also want to showcase, just real quick for you guys, some of the, I want to show you guys some of the amazing projects that we're going to be working on here. This is some of these things, these should be in my course trailer, but I'll just show you a couple of things that we'll be working on here. Hold on. This has got to be by far my favorite one. So when we go over the fluid dynamics, we go fluid, smoke, and fire. This is one of the final projects that we work on, and this is a fluid logo reveal. And there's no add-ons. This is completely using Blender, and I am just so happy to be showing you guys this right now because, again, this is something I posted on my Instagram as well. These are some of the things that you'll be learning in the course. You'll be able to easily create something like this by the end of my course. And again, all these core fundamentals work together so well. Yeah, if you guys have any other questions, definitely let me know. We got about 10 minutes left on the stream here. I can continue to answer questions about core as well because I think a lot of people are very excited for that. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull that up so we can talk about that just a little bit more. I'm gonna go ahead and loop this through again here. Again, core fundamentals of Blender. You have some incredible teachers here. I just love the logo too. They did such a good job on the logo. I wish I could take credit for that. It looks so good. Modeling with Jonathan Lampel. You're going to learn so much. You're going to be an expert modeler by the time you're finished with his part of that course. Sculpting. I cannot wait to take this sculpting. There's so much I want to do. I want to make my own character. That's something I've been striving to do for a while. What was my favorite part of the course to make? Spencer asks. Ooh, my favorite part, I really like dynamic paint. I think dynamic paint was probably my favorite part because dynamic paint is sort of like real physics, but it's kind of, I don't consider it real physics. It's using physics-based equations to calculate everything, but it's like, well, you'll have to watch the course to see. But dynamic paint is by far my favorite section of the course that I went over, and there's just some incredible, incredible things that you can do with it, such as simulating raindrops on a surface. That's a great one. I'm also really excited for this lighting course by Kaizen. He is a fantastic educator. I'm very excited to learn things that I can guarantee I've never known. And that's the beauty of Blender too, and the beauty of the fundamentals here is that the core fundamentals, I can guarantee you're going to learn things you've never known before. Even as I work with all these different people, I learn just how detailed they go into the directions and how they go into each little mini tutorial that they do. They outline everything and how it works. It's incredible. I'm also really excited for rigging. That is something that a lot of Blender artists find very intimidating, and I'm very excited to finally learn the things that I genuinely just don't know in Blender. Physics, I chose physics because I know the most about physics in Blender. However, again, there's rigging, there's materials, modeling. I like to think I'm a good modeler until I took a look at some of Jonathan's videos, and there was just so many things I learned in just the first 5 minutes, and I realized I was doing things so wrong and wasting so much time on little details. when there's always an optimal way to do everything in Blender, right? Doesn't mean you have to do it that way, but you will save hours of time when you watch these videos. He goes over everything. It's incredible. So I'm super excited to be able to learn more as well. And sculpting, I think sculpting might be what I'm most excited for. Hey Fody, how you doing, buddy? Basically, the 90-10 rule means that for about 90% of the tools in the software, you only use about 10%. Interesting. Accomplish the result that you want. Okay, I mean, I could see that. I can resonate with that, and I think you're 100% right, because when you look at Blender as a whole, right? Again, I'm mainly in the layout tab most of the time. Modeling tab, I don't really need that, right? Because it's just, well, actually, let's go to it. I just want to see what it is. Yeah, modeling tab is basically the same exact thing as the layout tab. I mean, more or less, right? It's just a big open window. I can go into edit mode right now and edit something. So there's really no need for me to go into that tab. So yeah, like you said, it depends how you use the tool as well. I know I can go into solid view here. I can click on an object, go into edit mode, and I'm in edit mode, right? I don't know why I'm all screwed up here. Here we go. Yep, so I'm in edit mode right here, and as you can see, everything looks fine, right? And I can do the exact same thing in the modeling tab. So we can be as efficient as we want with the tools that we have. But yeah, the 90-10 rule, I like that. I'm going to have to start using that for sure. Now, scripting, of course, it also depends on, I think, how much you know and what you're trying to accomplish. Most of the time, with this 90-10 rule, you can easily accomplish what you're trying to with 10% of the tools, right? And you don't really need to touch those other tools. Rarely will you use all the tools at once, at least from my personal perspective. So yeah, this was a fun one though, and I like I said, I'm going to try to get you guys this project file in one way or another. I'll make sure that somehow you can access this. Maybe I'll put it on Gumroad for free, something like that. But this is just such a fun project to work on. And I also want to show you real quick, just with the motion blur. I want to go ahead and render this image out real quick for you. Ooh, I'll end with one quick pro tip. How much time do we have left here? We have like 8 minutes left here. I'm going to end with a quick pro tip. Now, I put this on my Instagram, so for those of you who aren't following me, definitely check it out, because I post a lot of stuff like that. I do want to go over one quick pro tip with you, and I'm actually using the pro tip right now. So this looks really good, right? Now, this specific size, so that took about 20 seconds to render. I'm using 25 samples, right? And I'm using a 200% version of the resolution. So initially this is 1920 by 1080, and then if you bump that up 200%, right, you get a huge image, right? A double-sized image, pretty much 4K. But the key here is then you lower your resolution. So you can actually obtain a bigger image with a higher resolution image with lower samples. Try it out sometime. A lot of people think this doesn't work. It does work. I do it all the time. And the best part is, once you render your image, right? I'm going to zoom in here. You can then crop that image to a specific part of the render, and you can then pretty much get different cropped shots of the same scene. So win-win, right? Let's see. I'm learning Blender right now, and I really appreciate your tutorials and help for newbies. Yeah, absolutely. I'm more than happy to provide you with useful content. Thank you, Fody, for that comment. Applying textures on cube object. Do you need to adjust the UV? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you definitely do. I typically don't do UV editing in Blender. In fact, that is a great question for, hold on a second. Where are we at here? Texturing, materials and shading, and then where's texturing at? There we go. These two people right here, well, same person, you're going to want to talk to them because they are going to be your expert. And that's again why signing up for this core class is very important, because if you want to learn these things, all of your questions will be answered within that course. The rule takes the stress away from everything, trying to master everything that Blender can do. Yes, absolutely it does. Awesome. Do we have any final questions about anything we learned today, about the core courses, or anything at all? Make sure this webcam's level here. This is fantastic. I'm so glad I got to go over this, because again, this was something I just started experimenting with today, and I absolutely had to share it with the community because I thought the effect was so awesome. Any additional questions? I appreciate everyone commenting. You guys are a very active audience today. Let's see here. Make sure we're not missing anything here. Yep. And make sure you guys check out that link in the chat. CG Cookie posted it a couple times for you. cgcookie.com/p/core. and that is our landing page if you want to sign up to get notified about the course, or if you want to go ahead and head over to Blender Market, it should be available for pre-sale right now, currently. Not really. It was really clear. Thank you. Yes, no, absolutely, and I appreciate that. I try to go over the little details. The funny part about Blender and tutorials is that a lot of the time, if I don't go over the details, people will tell me, please go over more. But then if I go over too much detail, then they say, this video is too long, I don't feel like watching. So there is definitely a fine line when it comes to tutorials and online education, because you don't want your audience to get bored, right? But you do want them to learn something and have a takeaway. So I do think this is an awesome takeaway. Again, there's a lot of animations out there that are like this on using Cinema 4D, but you can easily accomplish the same thing using Blender. And that's what my goal was, is to show you there's always a workaround. You can always accomplish something in Blender if you just put that initial work in. Do we have any additional questions here? Let's see here. And thank you guys so much for being so active and commenting on this stream. I really appreciate it. All right. It looks like that's almost every question there. I just want to make sure I don't ignore any more questions. I want to make sure I answer every single question that you guys have here. I'm going to scroll up, just make sure I didn't miss anything. CG Cookie, very active in the commenting here. Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and conclude today's live stream. I really want to thank you guys for being here for so long and following along with this tutorial. Definitely check out the link in the description. And Omar says, if Blender gives you lemons, you make great lemons scene. Very true. Don't forget, guys, all of these assets are available for free on polyhaven.com. Check out CG Cookie's website, as well as the new core class that will be coming out within, hopefully, the next 2 weeks here. I don't know the exact timeline, but it will be coming out soon. So definitely check that out. Thank you, CG Cookie. Thank you, Blender community. I will see you guys in the next tutorial or the next live stream.